Welcome to the Mango Effect podcast, where every week we explore a range of ideas and inspiration that all culminate in designing the lifestyle that we've always dreamed of. No topics are off limits. We get into the practical, the hypothetical, and the downright juicy stuff. I'm Mindy Rother, your host and lifestyle cheerleader, and I'm here today to talk about the importance of putting the cup down. So have you ever had a meltdown? Okay, all of us are probably raising our hands by now, but maybe a series of meltdowns where you feel like you just cannot keep going as is because the cost is just too high. And you think, okay, I've climbed out of this one. Oh, everyone says like there's a down and then you just go up from there. But what they don't tell you is that a lot of times there are a lot of meltdowns that happen along the way. So some signs of a meltdown, it may not be an emotional meltdown where you're sitting on the floor crying. It just depends. Sometimes that happens to me. Sometimes it's like a health issue. So long COVID for me will pop up, or you just notice that you're getting sick with the colds and the flus and whatever's going around. Sometimes your relationships can feel a little bit rocky because you're just not able to put the right type of energy into your relationships, or your finances might be taking a hit as we are in this interesting time in the economy right now. Everyone's talking about inflation. That is a very valid concern and something that all of us, even if we are incredibly wealthy, we are still thinking about these things. This is not a topic that is, not affecting every single person, I would say, almost on the planet, but definitely in the U.S. and definitely in a lot of other economies that are connected to ours. So navigating any type of growth period, I view it as precarious at best. So trying to get through it unscathed, good luck. And most of us don't flawlessly make it through without some bumps along the way. A good analogy here is surfing. And I like to come back to surfing. If you have never surfed before, when you first get in the water, you may think, oh yeah, I'm just going to kind of hop on my surfboard. Oh, you just kind of paddle around. You just kind of like stand up, catch a wave, and kind of come in. What people do not know about surfing, especially when you first get started, you get a lot of bumps and bruises and all kinds of wonky things you never thought would happen along the way. So just even paddling out, sometimes if you are paddling over shallow reef, I like reef breaks. If you're paddling over like a reef or a rock, sometimes you can ding your board. Sometimes it gets caught on the fins, which are on the bottom of the board as you're paddling. Sometimes you hop off or fall off your board gracefully, hopefully, in the water, and then you like kick and thrash around and you kick the reef. Or you may hit a sea urchin, which are gnarly little beasts, and they kind of like shoot little spikes into your feet or your hands, whatever body part it is. You may get stung by a jellyfish. There are so many wonderful things that can happen while you're surfing, but you cannot expect to ever become a surfer unless you can navigate these things. You have to be able to do the rock dance. You could probably Google that and see a bunch of funny pictures and images and videos of people trying to do the rock dance, like to get to some of these epic surf breaks. You really have to be able to walk across slippery rocks and try to make it out into the water just to get to the spot where you want to surf. So using that analogy, there is no way to surf and get really good at it without running into some problems along the way. And sometimes I feel like we think, oh, well, we're going to hit, hey, there's this story. And sometimes it drives me bananas. The whole hero's journey story, where there's a hero, he has, here's turning point 1, turning point 2, turning point 3, and boom, finale, turning point, done, happily ever after. That's not how it works in life. Like, there's not like these beautifully scripted turning points where, okay, he's going to kind of go down, then he's going to come back up. He's going to go a little bit down and come back up. And then he goes really down, and then he comes really up, and he stays up there forever. That's not how business works. And I think sometimes, and that's not how life works. I mean, you don't have to have a business or a career to be thinking in these terms. There are so many twists and turns, especially when you're trying to grow. Now, if you aren't interested in growth, this is probably not the podcast you'd be interested in anyways, but if you aren't interested in growing, this episode's probably not going to be that relevant for you. If you're like happy and you're kind of just like, everything's going well, this is fantastic, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, Mindy, my life is wonderful. All right, then you can just shut it off now. But for the rest of us who are going through growth periods, most of the people that I know, the people I like to surround myself with, they are people that are dead set on growing. And whether that's growing spiritually, whether that's growing financially, whether that's growing a business, a career, making an impact, starting a foundation, trying to, solve really important problems in their communities or, worldwide at scale, or just trying to create an epic family and like a lifestyle that you actually enjoy. It does not come without a cost. And there are a lot of, I would say, downs, meltdowns, whatever you want to call them, that come along the way. So what is this? I know I mentioned putting the cup down. You're like, okay, Mindy, what is this whole putting the cup down thing? Okay, so I have a funny story. On this podcast, we like to keep it real. And I tell you exactly what I feel, what I think, and like how it truly happened. Well, of course, I'm sure there's a little bit of storytelling along the way, but I try to make sure that I'm not sugarcoating things, because I do not like shows where they sugarcoat everything. And you're like, oh, you're like this little perfect person with this little perfect business and this perfect lifestyle. No, that's not how it is. That is not how it is. And we need to stop having that picture in our minds of this is how a business grows. We have these little bumps along the way. We hit rock bottom and then we go sky high. No, there are lots of meltdowns along the way. There's a series of them. And sometimes they just feel like they just keep hitting you. As we would call it surfing, it's kind of like taking a bunch on the head. Like you're trying to paddle back out to the break and you just take like 5 waves on the head in a set. And you're like, oh, I just need to breathe. I just want to paddle. I just want to get over there. So that's how life is. So here's the story. So my wonderful husband, you've heard me talk about him before. And you heard him on the last episode of the podcast too. But basically what happened, I had a trigger on Friday and I record this on Sundays. So I had a trigger on the Friday prior to this, and the trigger was related to finances. We hear so much in the news about inflation and this or that. And there was something that just triggered me. And sometimes things just, you get like a bee under your bonnet and you're just like, oh my gosh, the world is coming to an end. Oh my goodness. And you just get stuck in a loop. You know what I'm talking about, that negative loop where the same thing just keeps going over and over and over in your mind. So for me to get out of that loop, what I have to do is I actually have to stop. I have to have space. I have to have like a few hours of space. I have to like pull out my logical brain and look at the problem. Like, what is the actual problem here? Is there even a problem, or is your mind just playing tricks on you? Because sometimes your brain will do that to you. And then I like to map out my solutions, So for me, that helps. And a lot of times I will also do some journaling. So if there's an emotional component, and for this one there was, I will do what I call morning pages. If you're not familiar, I think it's Julia Cameron. I think that's her name, but just Google morning pages and you'll find it. It is an incredible exercise if you need to like emotionally dump before you do your logical process. So I will do that. And then I will sit down with my logical brain and say, okay, Mindy, what do you need to do here? Like, what do you actually need to analyze? What numbers do you need to look at? And then figure out some creative solutions. What are your options here? So I did that. I was like, okay, I was about ready to do that, I should say. And Saturday morning I come out and I'm like, okay, I'm feeling pretty groovy. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to have my, I'm ready to do my morning pages. I'm going to drink my celery juice and I'm going to eat some breakfast and I'm going to do my brain dump, get all this emotion stuff out, and I'm going to tackle my finances. Like I'm going to just go deep in the weeds. I mean, I look at my finances every day, but sometimes, you got to do that deep dive. It's kind of like the deep cleaning. So I'm ready to do my deep dive. It's about that time of year too, right around June, July, I start thinking about these things. So my wonderful husband, he goes, Mindy, I'm making my celery juice. I'm not ready for this conversation. Mindy, you got to watch this reel. Okay. If you don't know anything about me, I hate reels. I hate reels. I hate TikToks. Like, I do not like things blaring at me. Like, you show me, I'm like, do it with the audio off and then I'll decide if I want to turn the audio on. I'm that person. I don't know what it is. I think it just feels like it assaults my senses. Like, I don't want to invite noise unless I know what the noise is going to be. I don't know. Okay, maybe it's just a weird quirk of mine. I have a lot of them. But so he's like, Mindy, you got to watch this reel. I'm like, oh, really? I got to watch this reel. I'm like, okay. I said, I'm going to make my celery juice. Just play it. So here comes the reel. The reel is like this, really smart. It sounds like an academic commencement speech. You know what I'm talking about? Those like awesome commencement speeches where they have the perfect metaphor for these graduates that are going to take on life. And I really don't know. I didn't actually watch it. I listened to the reel. So this guy's doing this metaphor about a cup. He's like, okay, here's a cup. there's like 16 ounces of water in this. So how heavy is the cup? And people are like, 16 ounces. He goes, yes, that's if you're holding it right now. But what happens if you hold it for an hour? You're going to be pretty tired. What if you keep trying to hold it for a few hours? You're going to be really tired. So basically the whole metaphor is about, putting the cup down. So like if you are stressed, if you are feeling something that is bothering you, why don't you just put the darn cup down? And I got pissed off. I will just say it. I just said it, didn't I? And I'm like, okay, thanks. And then he's trying to go into, he's like, yeah, Mindy, I don't really, let's talk about how I see the world differently. I feel like this really resonated with me. And all I wanted to say was like, you can put your darn cup down. I'm like, it's not as easy as that guy says. You can't just put the cup down. That metaphor simplifies things too much. Sometimes you gotta look at the cup. You gotta look at it from this angle. You gotta look at it from that angle. And then you gotta decide, maybe I can pour a little water out of the cup and then put it down, So I'm taking it in a completely different direction. And I went off on him. The poor man. I had to regroup, apologize, and put the darn cup down. And so when I was talking to Jason today about the podcast, I'm like, what should I call it? So you get to hear behind the scenes here. He's like, it should be put your cup down. And I thought that is hilarious. That is so, so true. And I think when you can come back to the point of laughing at yourself, then you know that you've worked through it. And it didn't take me too long to laugh at myself. I'm like, I took that so seriously. I felt like it was a personal attack. Like, Mindy should just put the darn cup down. Like, he could feel my energy. He's like, Mindy, you've been kind of like in your head, not talking, super intense, and just put the cup down. Like, how do you put the cup down? Do you need help putting the cup down? I can help you put the cup down. Let's figure this out instead of internalizing it. So I think when you can laugh at yourself, when you can realize what's really going on, I think that's telling you you're kind of turning the corner. So that's a really, really good sign. But right now, I feel like there are a lot of growth periods, and I'm noticing it just not just in myself, but also in a lot of people around me. Our culture is changing a lot right now. A lot has changed since the pandemic. Even just the way we interact with each other as humans, there are a lot of other shifts and wonderful things happening in the world, but also a lot of things that are not so wonderful happening and a lot of uncertainty. And we're always dealing with this, but sometimes it does feel more ramped up than others, especially if there are things happening in our personal lives that contribute to that. And it feels like it just kind of piles up. So I learned this concept over the past couple of weeks. I've been actually I will put the link in the show notes, doing this program called Duality, with an incredible spiritual teacher. I think it's Jeffrey Smith, but I will have to look just to make sure. But I know his name is Jeffrey. And it's with Mind Valley. And it's an incredible program. So you could Google Duality, Mind Valley, if you're not near your phone and don't want to look at the show notes. But it is a fantastic training. So it is definitely for those of you who are a little bit more on the woo-woo side. But I was really looking for something end of May-ish. I was looking to improve some areas of my spirituality. I'm like, okay, I need to find a program or some meditations or something that's just a little daily dose that I can kind of sink my mind into and allow myself to come down from my, type A drive. You need a little bit of that zen in your life. So I came across his training, and he talks about this concept called growth periods. And I'm like, a growth period? What the heck is a growth period? So basically when we're going through, I'll describe it briefly. I probably won't say it as awesome as he does, but basically a growth period is just like when we're asking for personal growth, when we are trying to take our business to the next level, when we're trying to make a career shift, when we are, trying to up our lifestyle, or we're trying to even move geographically. There are so many different things that could constitute a growth period. Maybe you're getting into a new relationship, or you are getting into a business partnership, or you're taking a new course that is totally transforming your mind and how you want to approach life, business, or career. So all of these would be considered growth periods. Now, when you're going through a growth period, it's usually, at least this is how I experience it. This is how he describes it as well. But it's kind of easy at the beginning. Like you're excited, you're feeling pretty good, you're pumped up. It's the first week or two in a new program, or your first week or two of a new habit, whatever that may be. And it feels really easy. And you're like, wow, this is so awesome. I'm gaining traction. This is exciting. I'm feeling good about this. And the more you get into it, you're like, okay, this is still great. This is still great. I'm glad it's so awesome. And then you're going to hit a point where you start feeling like how he describes it, kind of stuck energy. That's a little on the woo-woo side. For those of us on the little bit more logical side, it could be just that grumpy and overwhelmed feeling. And I notice that I do this a lot. Like, I will get super excited. I'm like, oh, cool, I'm going to try this new marketing strategy. I'm going to try this new approach to Facebook ads. And I'm going to, sink this amount of money into it, and I'm going to cash out on the other end. And then it doesn't go as you're planning. Or you're like, oh, I don't know how to troubleshoot now once I'm inside of this new awesome strategy. So it can be really, really easy to get stuck. And a lot of people I know, I talk with them. I have a good number of business friends, people that are also local to me. And we talk about this. We talk about this stuff because it is so important. How do we get through it when we get that grumpy and overwhelmed? And then a lot of times that actually turns into anger and being a little bit defensive. I get this way, and I would call myself like a little prickly porcupine. Like, don't say anything to Mindy when she's angry, because she may not say it to you, but she just has this look on her face, and she's probably going to go write about you in her journal. Like, this is kind of like the running joke in the house, right? Like, don't mess with mommy when she's angry. And this is not a good thing. Like, we need to move this through. We don't want to sit too long in this angry and defensive phase. And a lot of times we get stuck in these negative loops where things like one thought just kind of like loops into the same thing, and you just keep getting more angry and more angry. And you feel like you're stuck in a loop. It's like being stuck in the matrix and not able to get out. And then a lot of times we also get this self-righteous feeling like, I'm doing all this, but what about you? Like, you're not contributing to this. I notice myself starting to blame everybody. It's hilarious. Looking at it now, it's funny. When I'm in it, it doesn't feel funny. It feels very serious. It feels like, everybody else is like doing well, or they're just ignoring that I'm having this problem right now. And what's wrong with them? They should be feeling the same way as me. It's funny now, funny talking about it now, but in the moment, I feel like, everyone else needs fixing, and I don't need fixing because I'm always right. I'm Mindy. I'm always right. When we think about ourselves, we're almost always right. So that tends to happen for me. And then we start kind of moving into more of what I call like the wreaking havoc, or like frustration, struggle, or illness. Like for me, I'm noticing the growth periods even more than I used to. I think I used to be able to move through them differently before I had long COVID, because I could just kind of journal and I just let it simmer and I'd pack it away and it felt like it didn't bother me again. Now it's like my body will tell me immediately. So I think it's a blessing and a curse, because when long COVID pops up, I'm like, something's going on that I'm not dealing with, and I can't get away with it. So I used to be able to get away with it. So for those of you who do struggle with, things like chronic fatigue syndrome or ME or MS, it can be very, very challenging, I think, when these things pop up. I've had some friends, I've had some relatives and such that have dealt with similar things, and it's like their body tells them, hey, you gotta slow down. You gotta fix something. You cannot keep going at this pace, or you're going to run your body into the ground. So when that happens, use that as a moment to go, I'm in a growth period. How do I move through this? And then kind of coming out of that, we're like, okay, there's a lot of times there's a little bit of regret or embarrassment. I noticed this for myself, especially when this put your cup down reel. He was just trying to be helpful and give me a pep talk, and I turned it into something else and completely lashed back out and got upset about it. But looking back, I'm like, why did I say that? Mindy, why didn't you say something nice? Why did you say something that was so mean? Like, it was not kind in how I responded. And then you feel that embarrassment and you have to rectify it. You have to make it right. But I feel like that part is really, really important to kind of completing the bad growth period. And how do we actually move through growth periods in a way that doesn't hurt people around us? How do we get through these periods? Sometimes it's unavoidable, and sometimes it's going to happen. But what can we do better? I think really understanding your triggers. This is something that I have learned being the supportive person to my husband, Jason, and my wonderful partner, Jason. He's diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So something that I have learned along the way over the years with him is what triggers are. So a trigger is something that kind of pulls you into, most of the time a trigger is leading to something negative, not something positive. So a trigger for him, something will happen and it will pull something from his memory and his childhood, something traumatic, it could have been, some years ago, it could have been recently, but something will trigger him. And then it can easily, if it is not stopped in the moment, if it is not addressed, it can lead to a manic episode or a depressive episode, just depending on the type of emotion. So for us, learning to deal with triggers has been really helpful because I have learned, and I have actually taken notes, and we've had a lot of conversations about this and trying to understand what his triggers are. And in doing so, I can apply the same thing because even if I'm not getting triggered into a manic or a depressive episode, for me, triggers happen. And I'm able to recognize them. Like, I know when they do, and I can pinpoint them now. Like, I know exactly what happened. There was a piece of financial something that just got stuck in my brain, and it just went on loop. And is it anything to be afraid of? No, it's not. Like, when I sat down and did my whole logical thing, it's fine. Everything is fine, Mindy. Like, you're on a really good path. Things are going really darn well. But, of course, we always compare ourselves and we say, well, I should be farther along. It should be better. Those numbers aren't good enough. Look at so-and-so. And I don't even know what so-and-so's real numbers are. But, in our minds, we come up with all these bizarre scenarios and we judge ourselves and we're so hard on ourselves. But it all starts with that trigger. So when you see the trigger happen, when you realize it's happening, what can you do to move it through? And I think the key is not to push it down. You're not trying to suppress it. You're trying to address it. You're like, okay, that trigger just showed me something, whether it's from my past or something happening now, and I need to deal with this. This is something that is obviously important to me. So I know I've talked about this. What is the lesson here? And what can I take from this, and what can I do to move this through? Sometimes we can move it through pretty quickly, and sometimes we need, a day or two. Sometimes it's weeks, months. Hopefully we don't get stuck in a loop that is that long and repetitive, because that can be very, very damaging. But really understanding what your triggers are, what the triggers of the people around you are, can just help so much, because then you can realize if you're in a growth period or if they're in a growth period and what you can do to support each other during that time. For me, it really helps when I can process things first internally. I am definitely a blend of an internal processor and an external processor, and I used to just be an internal processor. So an internal processor is somebody who really works through situations by being alone. They like to, like I was mentioning, pulling out my logical brain and brainstorming, kind of getting my emotions out on paper, trying not to hurt people around me, but really kind of come to conclusions by myself. But I realized I need a blend, and something I have really benefited from over time is having a friend or partner, somebody that really gets it, that understands me, and is willing to be an external processor for me and help me work through situations. And sometimes this is a professional. Sometimes this is a therapist. Sometimes this is a really good friend. Sometimes it's an accountability partner. Sometimes it's Jason. A lot of times it's Jason. Let's just be frank and admit it. He definitely is a really great processor for me, and I appreciate him for that. So think about your triggers. Think about how you're going to process things when they happen so they don't completely derail you for a very long period of time. But there's always something beautiful that comes from these. When you go through a growth period, even if it's not like something that you feel excited about or warm and fuzzy about, there's always something really special in there. And I'm always looking for that. It's not about trying to reframe the whole situation. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times there's just a little nugget that you're picking up from this growth period that's going to be incorporated into this next version of you as you are growing. So be aware that there is always something like that in there, no matter how negative, no matter, you're like, Mindy, you don't understand. This growth period sucks. It's terrible. There's nothing pretty about this. Well, okay. Give it a little bit of time, give it a little bit of space, kind of get through those gnarly sections in the growth period and realize it doesn't stick around forever. There was something I learned just over the past week. I went to a long COVID seminar and just kind of learning some techniques to work through situations, and it definitely applies here. And one of the things that I took away from that, according to research, don't ask me to quote where the research came from, but an emotion only lasts for an average of about 40 minutes. In a really long emotion will last for maybe an hour and 15 minutes max. So think about that. A lot of times we're triggered and we feel that emotion very, very strongly. Now, Caveat is that emotion can keep repeating. Like there can be a breather in there and you'll feel it again. But think about that. That's only 40 minutes. You can deal with any emotion for 40 minutes. So hearing that from that perspective, I'm like, okay, an emotion is only 40 minutes long. I need to work through this. The more effectively I can work through this, the shorter that can be, especially if it's a negative one, and I want to get through it. So kind of keeping that in mind is really helpful. Realize we always get through these things. Listen to things. So what are some things that we can do that will actually help us, especially as we are dealing with things, whether it's, business and you're taking risks that sometimes pay off, sometimes they don't, sometimes you have to wait for the benefits, or whether it is having a family. Maybe you're bringing a new child into the world. Maybe you are trying to navigate a really sticky situation with your teenager. I've been there, done that. There are a lot of different things that require us to go through growth periods. And at some point, we all have to put the cup down. Like, put the cup down. I don't care how you get it down. I don't care if you throw it down. I don't care if it smashes into a million pieces. I don't care if you have to pour some water out little by little before you can put it down and feel comfortable. Whatever it is, we have to put that cup down. We cannot go around our entire lives always carrying cups. And I know people like this. It's like, okay, I feel like there's this juggling act. They're carrying probably like 6 to 8 cups. They must be like a waiter or a waitress. They can kind of like balance all these things. But they're so stressed out because they're not willing to put the cup down, because they feel like if they do, then they lose control, or that they're giving up. And you're not giving up by putting the cup down. When you put the cup down, you are making space to hold other things. And that's a beautiful thing. So if there's a cup that's weighing you down, put it down. Put it down. Here's your permission to put the cup down. And here are some ways that we can actually do that. We talk about self-care a bit on this podcast. Self-care is not the only answer, but it can help a lot. And I learned this also in working with Jason through bipolar. Like, there are certain things that make him happy. Certain things that if he does, it will calm his nervous system. It will kind of bring him down. It'll make him more even. And since discovering that with him, I have also incorporated a number of those things and started paying more attention. Like, this is what works for me. Like, I know what works for him, but what also works for me. So there are certain things that I like to do. Surfing, there's something about being in the ocean. When I'm in the ocean, that water touching my body, I feel so grounded. I feel like I'm earthing. I feel like I'm in touch with nature, and nobody else can bother me. Nobody can do a phone call here while I am in the water. Nobody can send me an email. I am surfing. So that's one thing that helps me kind of ground myself. Other times I do need to take a nap. So taking a good old fashioned nap can help. I have also learned something from Jason, of course. The magic of taking breaks throughout the day. Okay, you may say, Mindy, that's really silly. Everybody takes breaks. Or maybe you say, Mindy, people actually take breaks? Like, who takes breaks? Like, I'm eating and standing and working at my desk. I'm always on the go. I never take a break. So I am learning right now how to take breaks. So during my workday, during the week, I now have, 3 slots? I think I have 3 slots, at least 2. But I think it's usually 3 slots where I get to take a break. And that's where I eat my snack. So I am working through, healing an ulcer, a wonderful stomach ulcer, which requires you to be in a very calm state when you are consuming your food, because you want all of your digestion to work just right. So for me, I'm like, I know how to do this. And Jason's like, yeah, Mindy, take breaks and then just pair that with your snack time. So for me, I'm taking breaks during the day, and sometimes it takes me 15 minutes. Sometimes they're short. Sometimes they're 10 minutes. Sometimes it's like 25 minutes, and I get into a good conversation with the kids because now they're home from school over the summer. Sometimes Jason's there, and we get to talk about, a debrief of the calls of the day or what's been happening at work. But taking those breaks and sitting down and eating my food in a calm state, not trying to do emails, not trying to make a video and take a bite of food in between, actually is having a massive impact on me. So I don't know about you, but if you're not taking breaks, it is something to consider. And don't make your breaks active, okay, for you fellow exercise people like me who are like, ooh, I'll take a break. I'll do 50 burpees. Okay, that's not a break. That's exercise. So a break is calming. You're not going into yang zone. You're staying in the yin zone. Also, cleaning the house. I know a lot of digital CEOs, at least a lot of them that I surround myself with these days, talk about the fact that you should hire a housekeeper because you're wasting your time cleaning your house when you should outsource it. The whole 4-hour work week, delegate everything and just do what's important. Okay, that's not going to work for me because cleaning is actually a very cleansing thing for my soul. I have noticed that when my brain is tired, when I feel exhausted, sometimes I don't even want to work out because the workout takes a lot of mental energy, but I can clean. And cleaning my space, especially around my desk area where I like to work, where I spend a lot of my day, feels so good. Sometimes I'll go in there and clean with the kids, make their rooms feel good, and I feel like $1,000,000 afterwards. Is it very exciting? No. But there's something about it that just cleanses my soul. I listen to a super fun podcast that is not business related, that is not type A, that is really chill. Sometimes I'll listen to surfing podcasts, something really, really fun. And this is a really good way to kind of ground and earth myself. So maybe you're like me, maybe you're not, maybe you're like me, I don't care what you say. I hate cleaning. Okay, in that case, just hire a housekeeper. But for those of you who get something out of cleaning, let's have our Zen time cleaning. Maybe you're cleaning and listening to this podcast. Who knows? Also, support from a good friend or spouse. And I know I've already talked about this, but when you're in a growth period or when you just need extra support, you're trying to put that cup down and it's not working. If you have a really good friend, a family member, somebody that you can trust, a professional, I feel like the best people to talk to, especially for me, like a therapist, because you're not hurting anyone and telling them all of this stuff and just kind of dumping. You want to be very, very thoughtful about what you're processing and with whom you're processing it. Because if you are known for dumping on people or dumping on a friend, you may notice some friends don't really want to be around you. But then there's that fine line where you do want to be vulnerable and you do want to share these experiences with people. So knowing who to actually talk to about what. That is a really, really big distinction, and who you can process certain things with. I have my business buddies, and hello, I know you're listening because you've told me you are listening. My little business buddies, and they're fantastic. If there's a business something that I want to process with them and just share and just, get feedback from them, they're there for me in that respect. Now, would I go talking to them about my, family relationships or difficulties I'm having with, other aspects of my life? No, I wouldn't. That wouldn't be appropriate. So think about who in your life you can talk to what about. So you have multiple people that you can talk to, and you are not alone. That's the thing. Just remember, you are not alone. There are people out there. There are professionals. Even if you feel pretty isolated, I know a lot of us are feeling that way these days. There are people out there that are willing to talk to you and are willing to listen. So do seek them out. All right. So, and then one thing I want to end with, laughing at yourself. You gotta laugh at yourself. I take myself way too seriously most of the time. The older I get, though, the more I've been able to laugh at myself, and I can make fun of myself, especially my antics over this past weekend. I've just been laughing multiple times about it with Jason. And even the kids, they noticed, they're like, yeah, Mommy, you were really grumpy. Yeah, And I think being a good example, if you have little ones at home, if you have teenagers at home, if you have other family members that are affected by, you going through a growth period, be honest with them and share with them, in age-appropriate ways, of course. But let them know what you're doing and laugh at yourself and say, yep, that was Mommy. Mommy was having a rough day. Mommy processed it. Mommy made it better. The whole consolation hugs with everyone and apologies. That is a really important thing. And I've noticed my kids have actually picked up on that because both Jason and I have been, I think, a little bit more thoughtful in our interactions with each other in making things right. If something is not quite right, our kids will see us, talk through something and then make up, and actually hug, say, I'm sorry. And they hear these words and they see how we interact and respect each other. And it's really neat and interesting because we have a little boy and a little girl. He's 6, she's 8. And when they get into a tussle with each other, they always, every single time, we do not have to tell them, go apologize to your sister, go apologize to your brother. They actually feel uncomfortable until they make it right. And it's really cool to watch because I think, wow, I wish I would have had that at 6 and 8. That would have been a really good skill to have. Would have saved me a lot of fights with my brothers. So kind of think about these things. How are you modeling these things to the people around you, to, the little people who are paying attention. Maybe you have some nieces and nephews. Maybe you have other people in your life. Here in Hawaii, like we have what we call ohana. So there are always people that may not be blood relatives, but they are kind of like part of your family and they're with you a lot of the time. So if you are in a similar situation, how are you affecting those people around you? Because you are always modeling your values. You're always modeling to them how you work through things. And when they see it, when they come and they watch you, deal with these crazy things, it was funny because my daughter actually came up to me and, I went through this whole thing over the weekend and kind of, got my head back on straight. And she goes, "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be just like you." She's like, "I want to be an entrepreneur. I don't want to work for anyone." And I thought, wow, she just watched me go through this very, Mommy was very intense for a couple of days trying to work through things, but still, that didn't turn her off, to being an entrepreneur. She's like, "Oh yeah, you just got to work through things, Mommy. Everything is good." And so think about these things from that perspective too. Like you are affecting the people around you, and how can we, pass on that good energy, those good vibes to them. All right. So we've talked about a lot today. So do you feel like you have been carrying that darn cup around with you and you'd like to put it down? If so, put it down. Figure out a way that you can put it down or at least make it lighter. Talk to somebody. So if you've been dealing with a growth period lately, what can you do to get through that growth period, to navigate it even just a little bit more smoothly? Maybe don't kick that rock on the reef. Maybe it's like, okay, just don't thrash when you fall off next time. These are all the things that we learn along the way, and don't beat yourself up if you aren't like the perfect spiritual master moving through this growth period perfectly with no flaws. You don't have to be that person. All right. Be real. Get through it. And if you get some bumps and bruises along the way, it's okay, because you'll make it to the other side and you will grow as a necessary part of that process. So how can you run your energy? If you're like interested in the woo-woo side of things, just Google like running your energy, because there's some really cool, I call them almost like self-hypnosis or meditations that you can do to actually just kind of picture yourself grounding or whatnot, which I have actually tried and they're really neat. So I don't know, whatever works for you, think about what works for you, but move through. Don't get stuck. Don't get in the loop. Don't, start, hurting other people around you because you're so frustrated. Put the darn cup down. All right. So that's it for this week. Let's encourage and inspire each other and put our cups down. All right. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to the Mango Effect podcast wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss an episode. I'd be absolutely thrilled if you are really liking the show. I know we are 20-something episodes into it now. Feel free to write a 5-star review for the show if you love it. That will definitely help us as we grow. So any reviews and subscribes we get are also helpful. So I will talk with you all on the next episode. Have a beautiful rest of your day.